Welcome to Marshmallow Stories. Have you ever been told you're too small, too quiet, or just not enough to do something big? Today's story is for anyone who's ever felt that way. It's about discovering a secret power hidden inside all of us, inspired by a wonderful quote. If we did all the things we are capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. So get comfy, and let's dive into the astounding adventures of a very special little cat. In the sun-dappled neighborhood of Clover Lane lived a kitten named Whiskers. She was, without a doubt, the smallest kitten anyone had ever seen. She was so tiny, in fact, that her attempts at a mighty meow came out as a soft, squeaky mip. The other animals in the lane absolutely adored her. They'd nuzzle her, bring her tasty treats, and make sure she was always safe. But they also had a habit of underestimating her. "Oh, Whiskers," Barnaby the old badger would say kindly, "the big maple is much too tall for your little legs." "Whiskers, dear," chirped Pip the sparrow, "catching the firefly queen is a job for the swiftest flyers, not tiny paws." Even the other cats, while friendly, would wave a dismissive paw. "Leave the obstacle course to the bigger cats, little one. You might get trampled," Whiskers never argued. She couldn't deny it, she was tiny. She could curl up inside a teacup and take a nap. But deep inside her tiny, fuzzy chest, she had a heart that felt enormous, a heart that hummed with a restless energy and a yearning for adventure. She would watch the other animals leap and climb and race, and a little voice inside her would whisper, "I want to do that too." One bright, beautiful morning, a wave of excitement swept through Clover Lane. Colorful posters appeared on every tree and fence post. The mayor, a wise old owl named Professor Hoot, announced the annual Great Garden Challenge. It was the biggest event of the year, a thrilling race that tested speed, agility, and courage. The course was legendary. A winding path through dark garden hose tunnels, a daring climb up the enormous big maple tree, a dizzying walk across narrow fence beams, and a grand finale that involved catching a magical glowing ribbon released high into the air. Almost immediately, a line formed. Squirrels chattered excitedly, dogs wagged their tails with booming barks, and rabbits twitched their noses, ready to bounce their way to victory. And then, a tiny, fluffy figure stepped into the line. It was Whiskers. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to see the front, her little paw placed firmly on the registration leaf. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone turned and blinked. A big ginger cat named Rusty leaned down. "Whiskers, is that you?" he asked, bewildered. A rabbit giggled. "You're joining the race? You're too small." "You'll get lost between the dandelions." Another animal called out, "The tunnels will swallow you whole." The concern was mixed with a bit of amusement. But Whiskers, summoning all her courage, looked up at the sea of large faces and lifted her chin. Her voice was just a squeak, but it was steady. "I just want to try." Professor Hoot, perched on his branch, looked down at her with his big round eyes. He saw the doubt in the crowd, but he also saw the spark of determination in Whiskers's gaze. He cleared his throat. "Every creature in Clover Lane is welcome to participate," he declared. "Let the challenge begin." With that, the whistle blew a loud, clear hoo, and they were off. It was a chaotic, furry whirlwind. The squirrels zoomed ahead in a flash of bushy tails. The dogs bounded forward with joyful leaps, their paws thudding on the soft earth. The rabbits bounced through the grass like living pogo sticks. And amidst it all, a tiny gray ball of fluff darted forward. Whiskers's little paws tapped the ground like gentle raindrops. At first, she was lost in the crowd of bigger bodies. But soon, her size became her secret weapon. When the bigger cats had to duck and crawl under low-hanging branches, Whiskers slipped under them without even slowing down. She was a tiny, furry shadow, flowing through the undergrowth. Next came the infamous garden hose tunnels. The larger animals had to wiggle and squirm their way through the dark, narrow tubes. They grunted and complained as they got stuck, but for Whiskers, it was like a superhighway built just for her. She zipped through the tunnels like a fluffy bullet, emerging on the other side while the bigger contestants were still struggling in the darkness. The crowd, which had initially dismissed her, started to murmur. "Did you see that? Was that Whiskers? They watched, astonished, as she reached the base of the big maple, a tree so tall its leaves seemed to touch the clouds. This was the part everyone thought would be impossible for her. The big cats used their powerful muscles to launch themselves up the trunk, digging their claws in. But Whiskers didn't have their power. She had something else: precision. She looked at the bark not as a sheer wall, but as a ladder of tiny ridges and grooves. With perfect paw placement, she began to climb. Her movements were light, quick, and efficient. She wasn't muscling her way up. She was dancing. Higher and higher she went, a tiny gray speck against the massive trunk. The gasps from the crowd grew louder. This wasn't just a kitten trying. This was a kitten excelling. After the tree came the fence beam balance. The dogs wobbled, their tails wagging frantically for balance. Some of the heavier animals decided it was too risky. Whiskers, with her low center of gravity and feather-light weight, trotted across it as if it were a wide, paved road. She was gaining on the leaders. Finally, she reached the finish line area, just as the final challenge began. Professor Hoot released the magical glowing ribbon. It swirled up into the sky, sparkling like a tiny comet made of pure light. This was the ultimate test. The big cats, who had just finished the course, gathered their strength. One by one, they leaped, stretching their bodies towards the sky, their claws extended. But the ribbon was too high. They missed and landed with disappointed thuds. The birds of Clover Lane swooped and dived, trying to snatch it from the air, but the ribbon was too unpredictable, darting and weaving. They overshot it every time. Everyone stood and watched, waiting for someone strong enough, or tall enough, or fast enough to finally catch the prize. The leaders of the race were exhausted, panting on the ground. And then there was Whiskers. She wasn't panting. She was watching. She didn't leap the highest. She didn't run the fastest. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on the ribbon. She saw something no one else had noticed. After its initial flight, the ribbon began to drift down, caught on a gentle, invisible breeze. It was floating slowly, peacefully, back towards the earth. While everyone else was still looking up, Whiskers calculated its trajectory. She crouched down, her little muscles tense. Then, with a perfect spring-loaded jump BOing, she launched herself into the air. It wasn't a high jump, but it was the right jump. She met the ribbon mid-float, her tiny paws closing around the silky, glowing fabric. For a moment, there was complete silence. Whiskers landed as softly as a dandelion seed in a patch of plush green clover, the magical ribbon held triumphantly in her mouth. Then, the crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles, and applause echoed through Clover Lane. Squirrels chattered, birds sang, and dogs barked with joy. That day, the tiniest kitten in Clover Lane had done the impossible. She had won the Great Garden Challenge. She had astounded everyone, the big cats, the fast rabbits, the wise old badger. But most of all, as she stood there with the glowing ribbon, she astounded herself. Whiskers learned something far more valuable than how to win a race. She learned that being small on the outside has nothing to do with the size of your spirit on the inside. Being capable wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about believing in yourself enough to try. Trying was the key that unlocked the hidden magic she never knew she had. From that day on, Whiskers was a legend in Clover Lane, but she didn't let it go to her head. Whenever a new adventure presented itself, a tall fence to explore, a mysterious sound to investigate, or a new friend to make, Whiskers would just stretch her little paws, a confident gleam in her eye, and say with a happy little mip, "Let us see what I can really do." And that's the story of Whiskers. It reminds us that our own limitations are often just stories we tell ourselves. The next time you feel too small for a big dream, think of Whiskers, take a deep breath, and just try. You might literally astound yourself. Thank you so much for joining us for another Marshmallow story. If you enjoyed Whiskers' adventure, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale. Until next time, keep believing in your own hidden magic.